Okay, so do you want to just start? And
What's what's the name of the podcast?
I was honestly just thinking SNL, a look back or a look back at SNL, because they have that famous short movie with Belushi, Don't Look Back in Anger.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Can I pitch an idea to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to pitch that we call it SNL Hell, because I think as we continue to go through these, you will feel like you're in it.
Yeah, but there's also good stuff though too, right?
Of course,
Um,
but it's going to be like levels of it. I don't necessarily
okay,
mean it's all bad, of course.
no,
It's kind of like I was thinking like Dante's Inferno kind of thing. And there's all these different levels of it, and it's all kind of I didn't mean hell like this is trash. I
okay,
just like it rhymed and there was different levels of it.
okay, yeah, no, let's or SNHell.
Oh, that's good. Oh,
Okay,
let's call it
SNHell.
that.
Okay,
That spoke to me. I popped a little.
okay, cool. And can I subtitle it?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
a look back.
It's SNHell, a look back at Saturday Night Live with your hosts, Matt, Dee, and Keith. Brought to you by Lion's Den Audio Theater. Like and subscribe to Lion's Den Audio Theater for more Lion's Den goodness. And here are your hosts, Keith, Dee, and Matt.
And this is episode 1 of Saturday Night Live with host George Carlin, and it originally aired on 11 October 1975.
May I introduce our plan?
For sure.
We'll start at the beginning. We'll talk about episode 1.
Our host is George Carlin. Tell us what you know about George Carlin and what you think of George Carlin.
For me, I'm 27 years old, so for me, George Carlin was the face of like atheism and anti-establishment. So for me, this was my first time seeing his stand-up, as opposed to just his political opinions that you kind of see at the surface of the internet now. So that was interesting for me.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, the person that introduced me to George Carlin they'd be in their 80s now if they were still living. And, I know even my kids have seen some of the memes on the internet. So he's definitely spanned the generations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, you have a background in comedy. What's your thoughts on Mr. Carlin?
I'm not a big George Carlin fan. I find it a little abrasive. I find it a little I'm smarter than you, a little patronizing. It just rubs me the wrong way. And I think it's sometimes it's just, I'm not a fan. What do you want me to say? My first memory of him is dressed all in black. He had the black sweater, the black pants. It's when he had the silver hair and the little ponytail. And he was like going back and forth across the stage. And, it didn't feel like comedy to me. George Carlin to me doesn't feel like comedy. My first memories of George Carlin. They certainly didn't feel like comedy. Felt like I was watching lectures. And I couldn't get into it. And you know what? Here I am, however God many years later. And it still kind of feels that way to me, and I still can't get into it. I'm not a George Carlin fan.
Let's see, Janis Ian. You guys have much prior knowledge. We'll talk about her performances in a bit.
I knew that Janis Ian. Speaking of late night TV, one of my favorite things that I would always see on late night TV growing up, we're doing this podcast, could be like late night TV. I loved Time Life infomercials. I could watch Time Life best sounds of the 70s infomercials for 3 hours. And sometimes I would, because they would just loop them. So I'm there on the internet, in chat rooms and shit, and the Time Life commercials are just playing in the background. And Janis Ian's at 17 is a presence on all of these. So that's how I knew the song, or rather that's how I knew Janis Ian, pretty much like how anybody who knows Janis Ian, unless they lived through Janis Ian, knows Janis Ian. Did you know Janis Ian?
I had absolutely no idea who she was until I watched this.
Yeah.
And now, since yesterday, I've been going down a little bit of a rabbit hole because I'm really interested in her, and she definitely wasn't somebody that I grew up with. she was, in my opinion, like a little bit ahead of her time. I feel
For
like
sure.
if this music came out now, I'd be bopping to it.
Absolutely. Billy Preston, any prior knowledge of Mr. Preston?
None for me.
D,
I don't think I have any prior knowledge either.
I know Billy Preston as the quasi-fifth Beatle. He was asked by Lennon almost to join the Beatles. He was a friend of Harrison's as well. McCartney nixed it. But he plays piano on Let It. I think he's at the Let It Be concert, but he does the really cool piano bit on Get Back. Andy Kaufman, of course, and Valri Bromfield. She wasn't a name I knew right away.
She did the high school skit. Was that her?
Yeah, I guess she was an early comedy partner of Dan Aykroyd's. I guess her influence in my life, and certainly Matt's as well. She was one of the main producers behind Kids in the Hall. So,
oh, really?
Yeah.
Gosh, I didn't know that.
No, it's a name I didn't recognize, but I guess she was a mover and shaker for those guys.
Good. Wonderful.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Do you want to jump into the show?
Yes.
All right, sweet. Saturday Night Live, the first cold opening features Michael O'Donoghue and John Belushi. A lot of the recaps online talk about it as a ESL class, but to me it just looks like a random encounter between a foreign guy and an American guy, where they're just the American guy says something, the foreign guy repeats it, and he just keeps repeating it until comedy ensues. What was your thoughts on this very first skit on the very first Saturday Night Live?
I thought it was a little bit silly. It's definitely, in a way, it was like a good introduction point as like, yeah, this is going to be a comedy show, but I don't know if it like really hit for me. It was like a 5 out of 10 for me.
I think, you know what, I didn't love it, but what an apropos start, because Saturday Night Live's, when we sometime in 2032 get to the end, we're going to look back and we're going to be like, you know what an appropriate first skit ever, because it wasn't a home run and you were like, that's cute, I guess. And it's going to feel right.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Michael O'Donoghue came from the Lampoon. He was when Graham Chapman died with Monty Python. A friend said he was the one true anarchist of the group, and I guess that's Michael O'Donoghue. I think both of yous would be super interested in a book about Michael O'Donoghue called Mr. Mike. He was a crazy man in a good way and in a bad way, so it's worth looking at. And after the skit, or in the middle of the skit, Chevy Chase enters and says the familiar refrain of Live from New York at Saturday night.
It felt right.
Yeah, I was into it. I thought it felt good. I thought it was, to use a wrestling term, I popped a little.
I've become so used to the cold opens as these longer bits. So it's just like bang, bang, we're in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the unsung hero of Saturday Night Live, announcer Don Pardo.
Velvet Voice. Don Pardo features on a Frank Zappa record. He comes out and he does a little shtick on the Illinois Enema Bandit.
Great voice.
That man died in his sleep when he was 96. That's so peaceful.
And I think he worked right up till the end, eh?
Yeah.
It looks like it. Yeah, he did.
I think there is a period in the middle where there's no Don Pardo, but he pretty much spans the whole show. He may have done more episodes than Lorne Michaels himself up to the point of his passing. So it's great to see him. The opening, I mean, obviously it's changed, but to me, I don't know if you guys agree or not, but the look and the tone stayed pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the credits in this early first season are really cool. I love the aesthetic. The music is cool. The filters are cool. It has such a cool vibe.
It feels like
it.
Saturday night.
Yeah.
It really does. That's a great point. It feels exactly like the show still feels today, even though it's different. I noticed in the credits, both Michael O'Donoghue and George Coe were credited. And I think that will sort of cycle. I think this is the only time Coe ever gets the credit. But O'Donoghue only gets it, I think, when he appears. Because when we think of the original cast, we don't include those guys.
Right. Never. I never do.
So next up, we go to a George Carlin, the first monologue. He says he was stoned, and I think it's kind of obvious.
It is very obvious.
It is obvious. Okay. Did you know he was stoned, or is that just... Did you just think it from his...
No, I didn't know. I was like, something is off here. Like, it feels like he's kind of all over the place. I have it in my notes. It's like, this man is kind of like all over the place, jumping from one thing to one thing.
Yeah, it's weird. It's because he does the football versus baseball routine, which in my opinion is funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard it done. He's done it better in other places. Like it seemed kind of odd. You know, when you get like a live bootleg of a song and it just doesn't sound as good as the studio.
That's how I felt every time he talked.
So apparently he was forced to wear a suit. He had abandoned suits quite a while before. They made him wear a suit, but he kept the t-shirt underneath. So
good for him.
Anything specific about the monologue? I mean, it's the first one. It just seems like a regular stand-up bit to me, and he wasn't as good as he is elsewhere, is my opinion on that.
Indeed, Keith, I didn't care for it at all. Okay. I just thought it was just really some like shitty nightclub stand-up comedy. There was nothing special about it, and he didn't do it well.
Now we jump to our first commercial. It's New Dad Insurance, featuring Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, and Chevy Chase's then-girlfriend, Jacqueline Carlin, who is no relation to George. She later married Chevy Chase, and she also married intended Manson victim Terry Melcher later in life. And Terry Melcher, of course, co-wrote Kokomo for the Beach Boys. My opinion on this, fun skit, good first commercial.
Yeah, I think so too. And historically, SNL commercials are for me one of the things that they just do best. They weirdly excel at them almost across the board. Of course, there's some duds, sure. But what a staple. And what a fun first one. And I just thought everybody was good in it. I really like this cast. And, you know, they're not stars yet. And I think you feel that. I feel that. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was exciting. It's exciting to watch them in this.
For me, it wasn't really memorable. Mm-hmm. I didn't write anything down beside it.
Sure.
But I do remember thinking that it was clever. And clever is enough for the first one for me.
Yeah. It's funny, Matt, you mentioned, like, they are young. These guys are in their early 20s, most of them.
Crazy.
Like I think Lorraine Newman was 22.
What?
She might have been the youngest.
Wow.
And these guys were babies, you know. Of course, it's hard to look at anyone from the 70s and think they're 20, you know. Okay, and then we go to Billy Preston. He sings Nothing for Nothing.
This absolutely slapped for me. To me, this song encompassed like black joy, and I don't know. I didn't realize that Saturday Night Live, to be honest. I expected to come into it being like, there's not enough representation from the types of people that I look for now. But I did find that, and his outfit was bomb. Everything about it, it slapped. I loved it. Yeah, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And again, seeing that black joy, like on episode 1 of Saturday Night Live, like, that really set the tone for me of how much it would contribute to black people, and I just love that.
The music seems more representative than the comedy. Am I wrong in that, or?
No, you're absolutely right. It is definitely more around music, and it makes sense because I think at that time, at least, I wasn't alive at that time, but from what I have seen, it seems like black people were trying to establish themselves more seriously in music. They weren't really at the forefront of comedy in that exact moment.
For sure.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they integrate into it and how it kind of switches later on.
Yeah, and I mean, even up to today. I mean, it's only recently there was big news stories about not having African American females on as comedians, because I mean, that's going to be an interesting evolution, and I will argue maybe devolution at certain points where it definitely goes back to beforehand. Matt, what did you think of Billy Preston?
Yeah, I loved it. I was unfamiliar with the music, and it kicked ass. I think at some point, especially when it started, Saturday Night Live was a cool show, and it will go, as you guys just discussed, it will go through its phases of when it's cool and when it blows. But certainly when it started, Saturday Night Live was cool. It has a cool vibe. This is a cool showcase. The song is awesome. Home run for this first musical performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is not my genre at all, but I loved this performance. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I energetic. It's funny when I think of after 12:30 or 12:30 for us in Eastern Canada, Atlantic Canada, but 11:30. It's almost ballsy, especially that early, to put something so upbeat and happy at bedtime. So I commended them for that too. So we go to a skit. It's a courtroom. Chevy Chase cross-examining, or actually direct examining, Jane Curtin, where a man said something disgusting to her in a back alley. Curtin won't repeat it, but writes it down. The note that she writes is passed around the courtroom, and comedy ensues. How did this one sit with you guys?
I did not think that it was funny. It was like a 2 out of 10 for me. It felt really cheap, like a cheap kind of laugh. Too much left to the imagination of the viewer, which made it not hit for me.
Agree. Amateur hour.
Yeah.
You need to work on that. Get your shit together. This is not what's going to sustain the show. Complete misfire.
This one looked like something from the reject bin from Laugh-In, or even something older than that. It was kind of out of place. The fun note for me, did you notice who was in the jury, Matt and Dee?
No.
Richard Belzer was one of the extras in the jury.
That's fun.
Yeah. Does
Munch.
absolutely. Yeah, John Munch does absolutely nothing. Our next bit is the Andy Kaufman Mighty Mouse bit.
I laughed when I first saw it. I laugh every time I see it. Even though I know it's coming, I laugh every time.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it and I'm grinning. This is 5-star comedy. I love it. It's classic television. It's one of my favorite TV moments of all time. I think it's brilliant.
I'm sorry, I'm already laughing. I'm literally crying. Like, that is peak comedy to me. It was 10 out of 10 for me. It was my first time seeing it, and it was so good. It was just so good. He was so funny.
Yeah, this is gold. I respect people that don't like Andy Kaufman, but to me this is comedy. I'm like you guys. I'm laughing and just thinking about it.
I'm still laughing.
Like it doesn't get any better than that. Something that you can laugh at. I can look back at all these funny skits and be like, yeah, that was funny. But they don't make me laugh because I'm not watching them. I can just think of this and get a chuckle.
Yeah.
It's like a song. It is a song, but you know what I mean? It's like it's still like I know it is a song, but it's like comedy as a song that you can play back a little comedy skit in your head.
So George Carlin, he does another set, sort of random observational stuff. I found it funny, certainly not Carlin at his best, but I found it all right.
For me, again, I don't know. George Carlin, like, doing his stand-up in a host position, it feels like a rapid fire, like he's shoving his comedy down my throat, and that I don't like it. I just don't like it. I rated it 4 out of 10 in my notes. Matt?
My opinion of George Carlin has not changed. It will not change. I don't really like it. I don't get the humor. And, there's always, and this is not to go off topic, but there's always that guy, hey, I thought you were a comedian, like George Carlin. Like, go fuck yourself. Go. There's those guys are out there. Those people are out there. Yeah, you don't have to, like because you tell jokes that you have to like every famous comedian. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't like George Carlin. He doesn't make me laugh, and he's supposed to. So, that doesn't work for me.
Sure. Next up, I have Janis Ian singing At 17. I'd like to hear what Dee says first.
This had super soft vibes, which didn't work for the first episode of Saturday Night Live. I wanted to continue with the energy of like the last musical performance, but she didn't give me that. So I rated that a 3 out of 10. I wanted way more energy from her, but if it was taken out and I listened to it by itself, I would have loved it so much more.
I thought it was tremendous. I loved the performance, and I do disagree that I thought its placement in the show was A-okay. But I'd like to explain why I think that, I guess, because I think that maybe, Dee's going into this a hell of a lot fresher than I am. So I approach Saturday Night Live, even as I watched the first episode again, with certain expectations. just by accident, I'm not trying. But one of the expectations, I guess, subconsciously I go in with is that the musical performances, they exist unto themselves. They can be whatever I want. They can really just take those 5 minutes and they exist on, apart from the show, you know what I'm trying to say. And I think they do that so often going forward. And I think Saturday Night Live will always do that, and that they will always, have these just in the middle of, laugh, 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 weekend update, laugh, and then some like weird, creepy ballad. And I almost think that feels like an integral part of late night television to me. Late night television is kind of off balance. So I like that it's off balance, and I like that Saturday Night Live does drop these weird 5-minute performances that exist unto themselves in the middle of the show. I think this was no exception, but I do know that they just do that forever. So maybe that's why I was more okay with it. I don't know. Janis Ian, I thought she was awesome. Dee's right. She was ahead of her time. Could have been a bigger star in a different era. Beautiful voice, great song, totally A-okay with its placement on the show. One of my favorite parts of episode 1 was this at 17.
It's funny, I'm kind of in the middle with you guys. I thought it was a great live performance that was obviously live. Tremendous song that people still love. And I wrote here even before our talk that Janis Ian was kind of a rarity at that point. I mean, we're talking we're in the disco. We're in the disco time now. And I kind of likened her to Tracy Chapman. Remember Tracy Chapman's as a fast car in '87, like all these people doing crazy techno stuff, and she showed up with a guitar. I wonder with the placement if it was a drop in energy to sort of give people a little break before they went into the second part of the show and got things ramped up a bit more.
Maybe, but I don't like that they made the assumption of that for the audience.
What's next?
Shark Bite.
Oh, then I don't think there was any thought.
No, okay.
About that. If Shark Bite's next. If Weekend Update was next, I could see it.
So thumbs up from, well, we all like Janis Ian, I think. The timing might be off. So we're going to Shark Bite now. Jane Curtin interviews John Belushi, who claims to have survived a shark attack. But Belushi might not be entirely on the level. Goofy might have worked, in my opinion, better after we got to know these guys a bit more, but I don't know.
I just rolled my eyes. I thought this was just another amateur hour filler. I didn't. I'm like, it was like Sensible Chuckle Magazine. It's this is national television. I know this is an edgy new show. I know you're on late at night, but I mean, it's not the 1600. This is low comedy. This is pretty comedy. I don't know. This was definitely filler for me.
I never used the word lazy like loosely, and I felt this was very lazy, and it felt like filler. You could have dragged out like another song. You could have done so many other things, but you gave me this, and it felt like maybe a 5-year-old would find it funny.
It's really it's kids humor. That's what it felt like. It felt like a kids joke.
Yeah, you can't do that on television or something.
Yeah.
It kind of gave me the vibe though as like a spiritual successor to John Lovitz's Liar. Then we go to another commercial, Jamitol, where Chase talks about his wife, played by Mike O'Donoghue, with no costume or wig or anything, and how Jamitol gives him energy. This one, I laughed. A lot of the write-ups say like Chase and O'Donoghue are portraying a gay couple, which I guess technically it was, but to me it just seemed like Mike O'Donoghue was just standing there and decided not to wear a costume, or they decided just not. Maybe I looked at it at the wrong level, because he was just like, this is my wife, and it was just some guy in a brown sweater, I laughed at this one. I don't know. Are you guys on with me, or?
Kind of. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't really find it funny.
Uh-huh.
But for me, it felt like it didn't feel like a gay couple, and it didn't feel like he had forgot his costume. It
Mhm.
just felt like he was representing as a female without changing anything aesthetically about himself. And I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
liked that about it. I liked that they did that, and it didn't really feel like it was part of the joke. And I liked that. That's
Mhm.
all I have.
Yeah, I wasn't web. I mean, I think again, I exhaled sharply, nasally, but I certainly didn't hate it like I did the shark bite sketch or anything. This is the kind of humor I think that they'll develop a lot more going forward.
Sure.
This feels like a good, almost like a, I don't want to say like a test run because it was on TV, but you know what I mean? Like this is the
Yeah.
kind of style and kind of thing that they're gonna make more fun later. I almost think this was like a necessary, like, yeah, okay, that was like, haha. But do you know what I'm trying to say, Keith? Like, it's
I do.
this is
Yeah.
the development of a comedy that they haven't quite mastered.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think this is, I don't know for sure, but I would be willing to bet that this was Michael O'Donoghue wrote this and basically said, like, okay, I'm just going to stand there and be your wife and I'm not changing anything. Um, just weird stuff. Like, I know there's a skit with Christopher Walken later where he mentions his wife is a bobcat. And it really, like, it doesn't, I mean, it eventually plays into it, but not really. It's like, his wife could have not been home, or his wife could have just been played by a walk-on or something.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
it's just weird for the kind of sake of weird.
I
Um,
agree. And like
yeah,
if you did it now, I feel like it would just go over my head. I would just be like, that person identifies as a female, but like
Mhm.
watching it for the time that it was in,
Yeah,
yeah, I was definitely a little bit confused. I was like, is the joke that they're gay? Like, is the joke that they're trans? Like,
yeah,
where is the joke here? Other than the fact that it's called Jamitol.
yeah. That's right. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. The way I took it was just they just didn't bother casting anyone else. So
Yeah.
I don't
Which,
know.
I mean, that's funny in its own right.
So yeah, I enjoy that. It's almost Andy Kaufman-esque in a way.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Um, So then we see a promo for next week with Paul Simon. That'll be covered in episode 2. And then we get the first weekend update. Chevy Chase, what are your thoughts on the very first weekend update?
I thought that. Oh, okay. Let me just start at the beginning. I don't think that this aged as well as. I don't know if they had that in mind. Like, how will this age even in a year from now? Because I don't think it aged well. Chevy also lost his place, which is fine. Like, it's the first episode, but it also kind of like ripped me out of it. But Lorraine Newman, when they cut to her, I thought she was absolutely hilarious. I loved her. She could have talked for longer. Like, I loved that.
Yeah, I agree with D. Lorraine Newman was the star of this segment for me, and not unlike how I kind of feel about the episode as a whole. Spoiler alert. This is something that I kind of going in. I thought this was going to be funnier than it was, and it didn't really hit for me. And I'm not, any jokes about Gerald Ford or contemporary American politics in the mid to late 1970s. They're not going to be home runs. Which is fine. The SNL continues to do topical humor that's going to date poorly. It's obviously just a thing that they do, and it's perfectly fine that that's part of their philosophy. But hey, when we look back later, it's not going to be where you chuckle as much later. And I don't know. Yeah, I just thought it was going to be better. I got my expectations were pretty high, and they were probably too high, to be fair. It was fine.
No, I think we're all on the same page with that one. Awkward. It was funny at times, but it wasn't quite weekend update yet. The commercial in the middle, that's something we don't see anymore. I haven't seen for many, many years. I think that breaks it up. Like any moment.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish they would do that more. Because I think Weekend Update is a brilliant segment. It can be, they can make that shit a half hour for all I care. But and I think the fake commercials in the middle of Weekend Update really, I think, help take you somewhere, and it almost lulls you into like, wow, I'm watching a real show. There's a mental trickery to it. I wish they still did it.
My favorite short gag was the guest stay at the Blaine Hotel. Did you notice that?
No.
So Lorraine Newman was reporting from the murder scene at the Blaine Hotel, and then they cut to commercial, and it comes back, and Don Pardo's like, guests of Saturday Night Live stay at the Blaine Motel. Blaine Hotel. We're all on the same page about the first update. Not there yet. So yeah, the commercial is for Triopenen, an arthritis medication bottle that can't be opened. I've seen this joke. I don't know if these guys did it first, but I've seen this joke like 1,000 times done by different people. The child-proof bottle.
Like, it's funny because it's always going to be relevant, but at the same time, it makes me angry. Like, arthritis companies, like pill companies, fuck you. I'm a disabled adult, and I would like to get into my pain medication.
And then we come to the Muppets. Gosh. These are special adult Muppets that were designed for Saturday Night Live. Obviously, you recognize the voices: Jim Henson, Jerry Nelson, Frank Oz.
Thought it was pretty low rent for me. I thought it was misguided. I get what they're trying to do, and I almost appreciate the effort, but it's a no from me, dog.
Yeah, they made a mistake here. Some things about it were really funny, like Scrat's voice is absolutely hilarious. Putin's aesthetic is everything, but I just didn't think it was funny. Like, the puppetry doesn't really fit into Saturday Night Live. Like, it could be its own show, and I could respect it as that. But if this is going to continue, I'm not going to be vibing with it.
They're trying too hard to make it a variety show. Like, too much. They're trying too hard for the variety in their variety show.
Yeah, they're very much throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks right now. And, to me, these Muppets it just wasn't funny. They didn't go far enough to be edgy, and they're not cute and cuddly for kids. This was a huge flop for me. And let's get used to them because they're going to be around for a while.
At least the puppet design is cool. I'll give them that.
Yeah, absolutely. The puppet and the set design I liked as well. Jesus. Back to another George Carlin observational bit. Ditto to before as far as George Carlin for me. Funny but not his best is where I'm at.
I don't like the host format here in this first episode either. Just him rolling him out to do these little stand-up bits and not having him do anything else. I'm glad that that's not the way. That's not a winning formula. They'll figure that out, and it doesn't work here, I don't think.
So next we go on to the Albert Brooks movie. Albert Brooks he's been around forever. It's Super Dave's brother and the voice of Nemo's dad in Finding Nemo.
Most fondly remembered by me as Jacques.
Yes, that's right.
Marge's illicit affair from Barney's Bowlerama. Life in the Fast.
He was Serpico or Scorpio or whatever. Remember the boss? He's done a few Saturday Night Lives, hasn't he? Or sorry, Simpsons.
Yes, he's definitely a Simpsons around the Simpsons kind of guy.
Mm-hmm. So he's doing these series of short movies. I guess Brooks was asked to actually be the regular show host at one point.
I read that. Yeah, I remember that.
And he may have, it's one of these things where 1,000 people want the credit, but he may have been the one to actually suggest that they just have revolving hosts every week. He says he was. Lorne Michaels says he wasn't. So this goes through, a series. It's called The Impossible Truth. And it's a series of weird things that are happening in the world. I have a feeling this would have been a lot funnier at the time. But there's like a blind cabbie who still does 40 hours a week. Georgia and Israel decide to agree to change places. And one skit that would never air, or one bit that would never air today, is the age of consent is lowered in Oregon, and there's a man played by Brooks's brother Cliff on a date with a small child. This didn't do it for me, but what are you guys thinking?
I have it broken down like piece by piece. So the blind cab driver, didn't think that was funny. Unnecessary ableism. Just let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
The Israel and Georgia trade places was hilarious to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then we rolled into the age of consent, which I mean is relevant because I feel like our world is actually like approaching a point where that would be not something that's on TV as like a funny joke, but something that would be like
on
in the
TLC
news
or
on
some
TLC, like I'm dating a 7-year-old and
My
I'm
8-year-old
47, my
girlfriend.
8-year-old GF. Like that's how it feels to me.
Yeah.
And it was gross, but I think that it was valuable to put that in there so we can keep track of that type of, I don't know, behavior, just general weirdness in media throughout the time. And the whole thing reminds me of BuzzFeed. It feels like it was like a BuzzFeed YouTube skit.
Wow, yeah. I mean, all things considered, I was glad this one was over when it was the whole bit. But I did like, I think we're on the same page there. Georgia and Israel trading places was the highlight.
Didn't do anything for me.
No.
Wasn't a big fan of the film. And I like Albert Brooks generally. I mean, as much as anybody can like Albert Brooks. Who's a big Albert Brooks fan?
Yeah, Albert Brooks.
But I mean, like, when I hear the name Albert Brooks, I'm like, yeah, that's a funny guy. So it's not like I don't dislike him by any means. But this almost, it wasn't as bad as the Muppets thing, but it's still Saturday Night Live. Kind of trying things out. Now, don't get me wrong. This is definitely a format that they'll keep. They will continue to make these short digital films going forward, and they'll be, in my opinion, much better than this going forward. But I mean, you got to start somewhere, and it kind of fit the tone of the show. Saturday Night Live is trying to be like a cool show. It's trying to be a bit of an edgy show, I think. At least that's the vibe I'm getting. And I guess it fit in with the aesthetic. I would have watched more of it than another George Carlin bit.
All right, now Bee Hospital. A bunch of male bees awaiting the births of their babies. It's pretty much the whole male cast roaming about as individual members of the female cast come in with little baby bees. This is quick. It's weird. It's the debut of the bees. Like the Muppets, get used to the bees. They're sticking around for a bit. I liked it.
Yeah, I was into this. I thought it was, the guys, I thought they're playing off each other really well. They're the excitement, and every time another drone came out, I thought it was funny. And this was like a classic SNL skit. I feel like they could have done this skit like in the 80s, in the 90s. This feels like classic SNL humor. I think they nailed it here. It's just because it's short, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's cute, it's clever, and everybody is having a good time with it. I think it's what helps SNL succeed.
I loved it. I thought it was so cute. And by the end of the episode, when they were like, the next episode, and then they're like, it's a queen. I was like, yes, honey, I want to see episode number 2. Show me that queen, girl.
And then we go to a commercial. It's the ABC School how to answer phones professionally. This one has Gilda Radner and guest star or guest appearance by announcer Wendell Craig. I think Craig's voice is used a few times in the first season. This one was fun. It was a nice quick showcase of Radner's less zany self.
I think it was funny. Skilled phone answerers, just it's something that's always going to hit, especially if you've worked at a call center. You'll be like, I can relate to this. So I thought it was cute. I thought it was funny. I liked it. Matt?
Yeah, I also, it's, as you mentioned, Keith, it's nice to see Gilda, because I associate when I hear Gilda Radner, I almost, I see the big hair and the zany character. So I love the opportunity to see her do more subtle things. She was a good actress. What a shame. What a big star she was going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Then we go to Valri Bromfield. Like I said, former collaborator with Dan Aykroyd. She does a school teacher routine here. Didn't work for me on any level.
I don't really have a lot to say. I just didn't think it was funny. It was just bad stand-up. That's all I saw.
It was so awkward. Like, I loved her energy, but I don't know. It was just awkward. I didn't care for it.
Billy Crystal got cut for this piece.
What?
Yeah. Billy Crystal had a 6-minute thing. I think it was, I read somewhere, it was a Victor Mature walking through the desert. They cut him down to 2 minutes to fit this in, I think. And his managers were like, we can't do it in 2 minutes.
Good for him.
Yeah. So Billy Crystal was scheduled to be on the first episode of this, and I mean, you can't blame,
Threw it away
anyone.
for Valri.
Better things
Yeah,
to come for Mr. Crystal. Better things to come.
yeah. I mean, you can't hate Valerie for it, but
No.
Jesus, And Carlin's last stand-up, I don't know if we even have to go into it anymore. It's just a bit about it's more of his religion style stuff. Again, ditto from before. I thought it was good, but not Carlin's best.
What about that Show Us Your Guns, that clip of where the music is playing and
Oh
you
yeah.
see a bunch of people holding guns, and it's like pretty much everybody, like from old people to just anyone. Like it's so relevant and it's so ridiculous. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad I skipped that. Thanks for pointing that out, because that was that was almost where comedy's so right on that it's almost tragic, really. 'Cause
Well put.
that could have been shot last week.
Literally.
That was just kind of a short movie. That was fun. I liked it, but again, it was like how little we've changed, right?
Really.
We're into Billy Preston, Fancy Lady.
It was wicked. Shit,
Yeah.
I love this guy. You know what? It reminds me a lot of, I'm a big Frank Zappa guy. And this is, it reminds me of, I don't know if any Keith or D, if you know who George Duke is. I got George Duke vibes off this guy. For anybody who knows who George Duke is, he was a jazz musician in the 70s that played with Frank Zappa. Anyway, it was a hit. I loved it. I don't know why this guy, I was gonna say why wasn't this guy a bigger star? He was almost in the fucking Beatles. What the hell do I know? But he's not. He didn't go on to continue to be a household name. He was obviously an accomplished man. But you know what? Maybe it was a sign of the times. Maybe it's a sign of the times because, as we're going to see from SNL, music is about to go in a very different direction. So, what do I know? But I know that this performance was great.
And there were some personal demons there as well.
I see.
Yeah. And the guest vocalist, a woman by the name of Cyrita, who I've heard of before.
Amazing.
She was the ex-wife of Stevie Wonder.
Really?
And the co-writer of Stevie Wonder's Signed, Sealed, and Delivered.
She doesn't have to work anymore.
No.
I am.
One of these, like she was, again, it's like saying Billy Preston didn't make it, but she was a Motown, hardworking, well-respected Motown person who didn't, she did very well for herself, but probably could have been at the level of like a Diana Ross or Aretha Franklin.
Keith, if I may make the recommendation to you, sorry.
Yeah.
There's a Frank Zappa song about why a lot of these black performers did not become the sensations that their talent should have dictated. I recommend you check it out. It's called Nigbiz.
Okay.
And it is it's scathing and it's accurate. And a lot of these black artists were taken advantage of by record labels.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a shame. And I'm not saying this happened here. I don't know anything about it, but I know that a lot of these, that a lot of very talented performers were left behind in the wake of record company greed.
As far as the Billy Preston, see above, right? Just so much fun. So our next one is Simulated Assault and Burglary, where Dan Aykroyd and his partner later, Garrett Morris, break in on Belushi and Ratner to show how much the family needs security. Aykroyd is at his fast-talking salesman peak in this one. I enjoyed it.
Yes, I enjoyed it. Dan Aykroyd is my favorite, let it be known, of the original cast. I think that guy is an amazing performer. And you know what? He's really eccentric. He's going to get far out as he gets older. But this young Dan Aykroyd works for me. This is my style of comedy.
I guess I don't really have anything to say about this. I thought it was funny. I thought it was salesman humor, so anybody who has ever done sales in their life can definitely relate to this and find the humor in it. But it wasn't my favorite.
Dan Aykroyd is really gonna master this character. I think this is him, trying this on. This character is gonna sell us toys later. and it's going to be legendary. But yeah, I think this is an important sketch.
The next one I have is the ad for the triple track razor. I grew up with these commercials, and they're still on today. And Andrew Duncan is the announcer, and he basically talks about, how blades pull the hair out and cut it and whatnot. And then says, was it if you'll buy this, you'll buy anything or something like that, suggesting that these razor blade commercials are not on the level. I'm pretty sure it was Al Franken playing the caveman. And Al Franken, of course, decades and decades with Saturday Night Live, and later became a U.S. senator.
It was clever. I think that nothing has changed when it comes to razor commercials. I respect them, but also I'm not going to shave anymore. I'm just joking, but I do think it was really funny.
Yeah, I thought it was cute too. It's like it's very indicative again of the kind of late night. This is like really like last third of SNL style commercial comedy.
Yeah, and the final segment of the night, Janis Ian singing In the Winter. This song isn't as well known as At 17, but nice little tune. Probably a good way to end the evening.
I mean, I thought it was a curious, and I mentioned earlier that I thought At 17 was perfectly placed within the show. I don't mind. I did not find that a jarring change of pace at all, and I just loved everything about it. To end the show with this was definitely... I mean, that's a choice, right? That is a conscious choice. We're going to end the show with Janis Ian. So I got to think that like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking when are they like, we want this to be classy? Are we trying to be classy? Because it feels like they may be trying to be classy. It's certainly not teenage rock and roll by any means. I don't know what they're going for here. I gotta, as much as I liked and enjoyed the placement of the first performance of the show, and I liked this performance, don't get me wrong, curious and questionable decision to end the show, Janis Ian.
I would have been mad if I had seen this at the time. Like, you're watching this show, everything's banging, and then the end comes, and Janis comes out with her depressing ass, slow ass music again. It's definitely a 1 out of 10. And I'm just like, Janis, honey, like, this doesn't belong at the end of Saturday Night Live. And I don't know if it is Janis's fault, but I would like to assume that she had some amount of choice over which song she played, and I did not care for it.
I wondered, is Janis Ian like, one of these Norah Jones types who just really doesn't play anything fast?
Gotta be something.
Yeah.
I've heard a few Janis Ian songs. I mean, I didn't listen to her album start to finish, but I think I've heard more than the average person. And it's pretty standard, like 70s straightforward rock. I mean, I think she's obviously a talented performer. I don't think there's any like big songwriting hits or anything in there. It's, you tap into an aesthetic. The people that like the Virgin Suicides much later in life are going to be going back and thinking about this romanticized thing.
We're at the end of the show here. To me, this whole thing felt like, except for the ads, but if I was in the live audience and watching what was happening live, it definitely has like a 60s, 70s coffee house vibe to me.
Yeah, if I was seeing it live, I could see how that could tie back around for you, but watching it this many years later on TV, I guess it's easy to say, like, why did you make this choice? But as an audience member, I can totally see how that would fly.
Let's rate the host. How did you guys feel about Carlin?
George Carlin was a 3 out of 10 for me. It felt misplaced. It felt like for your very first show, somebody should have been introducing what was going to happen next. Maybe that's a weird expectation to have of a show that hasn't been on before prior to this moment. I felt like he wasn't even involved in the show. They could have just filmed him at any different hour, and it could have not been live.
I think his first episode, this was the first episode of Saturday Night Live, so I'm going to go ahead and give George Carlin 4 out of 10. Did not entertain me at all, but did not ruin the show.
Sure, it's Carlin. Not Carlin's best. I mean, Carlin's worst is still better than a lot of options, but he just didn't seem to be firing on all cylinders for me. I will give him a 5 as the host. If it was just Carlin, it'd be a 7. Carlin's ability is like as far as Carlin performance, it'd be like 3 out of 10. So I'll average that out as 5. Passable host. Yeah, let's rate the music. Billy Preston.
10 out of 10 for me. I loved it. I'll say it again. It was Black Joy. It's exactly what I needed from the music.
Billy Preston, 10 out of 10 Saturday Night Live performance. Energy, style, hipness, everything I want in a late night television performance.
Yeah, can't disagree. It was a lot of fun. He also wrote the song "You Are So Beautiful." You know, the Joe Cocker.
No
you
way.
are so beautiful to me.
Yeah. Janis Ian.
I still really like Janis Ian. I think her at 17 performance was a 10. I thought that was an excellent live performance. I thought her second live performance was in a really poor context. But I mean, it's not her fault. She performed capably. I think Dee mentioned something before about what did you say? What was she thinking? It's not up to her. She's got to take her shot. She's got to be on TV. They're letting her be on TV. When is she going to be not on TV?
I wanted something more high energy. Like, get your bag, girl, but I wanted something more high energy.
Oh, these people are told what to do, though. This is not Janis Ian's decision.
I wonder about that. I mean, there was a bit more freedom back then.
There has to be some amount of freedom. Like,
I think you guys are giving the
like,
music industry a lot of credit. The music industry is a shithole. People are trotted out and told what to play. You play the hits, and this is going to be your single.
Whatever choice it was, it didn't bring the energy that I wanted.
Shit choice. Don't think it was Janis Ian's. I am averaging Janis Ian out at a 7 out of 10.
Get your bag, Janet. Get your bag.
She was fantastic, but it was an odd fit for this new comedy show. So now we'll go with the worst bit of the night. What was the what was the drizzling shits of this show?
George Carlin was the worst part of this show for me. This did not work for me, and I hated his segments. They took too long, and I mean, there was too many of them. It should have been what's her face with the other fucking awful stand-up bit, which was worse than any of George Carlin's stand-up bits. But George Carlin had too many of these shitty stand-up bits, so he gets Matt Ryan's vote as the drizzling shits of this first episode, George Carlin.
I hate to say it, but like the puppet skit removed me from Saturday Night Live. Didn't do it for me. Again, I love the puppets. I love puppetry. I will appreciate it. It had no place here in this first episode, so it was not funny. I have it in like stars. I was like capital letters. This is not fucking funny to me, so that's it for me.
Yeah, for me it's either Valri, Bromfield, or the Muppets. So now the bit of the night, segment, skit, joke, whatever, just, your favorite moment of the show or your favorite segment of the show.
My favorite segment of the show was our, and maybe it's because of the promise of things to come, but the highlight of the show for me was the security sketch. With Dan Aykroyd as our salesman. I don't know, it's just what got to me the most. It's the one that made me laugh the most. It's the one I thought showed the most promise. It's the one that made me excited for things to come. This was my favorite part of the show.
For me, it was Andy Kaufman's Mighty Mouse. Like, I'll never get over it. That was peak comedy to me. I just loved it. If I can think about something later and still laugh about it, it's good. Nothing else on the list did that for me.
I totally get what you're saying. It was definitely funnier than, let's say, My Choice. I think My Choice is probably clouded by, like, I know that, like, this is going to be some classic. My Choice was I got classic SNL vibes from it. And I have a lot of nostalgia for the show, which I think seeing a sketch like that and knowing how much they refine it in the future, I think that clouds my judgment. Andy Kaufman was funnier. There's no doubt about that.
I'm with D too on this one. Mighty Mouse. I've watched the episode twice now. Mighty Mouse to me was just as good the first time as it was the second. And I mean, I say first time, but I've seen that bit probably 40 or 50 times over the years. And your star of the night, who's the MVP of this episode?
I felt like Chevy Chase brings, like, I don't know, some type of comfort to the show, some type of base level comedy that you can kind of expect. And I wish there was more of him in this first episode. I think he's so handsome. But I really, Chevy Chase for me, even though he didn't get as much screen time as I would have liked.
That's a good Chevy. I felt that also, because to look at Chevy Chase, especially this young Chevy Chase, to look at him in this is like, he makes me laugh to look at him. He's so good at the physical comedy, the shuffling, the stumbling around. He's so lanky. And he became a star for a reason. And he does have that magnetism that does make you want to see more of him.
That's a handsome man, honey.
Yeah. My star of the night, if we're removing music, would be Dan Aykroyd.
My star of the night too is Dan Aykroyd.
Okay.
Originally, I'd written actually Michael O'Donoghue for that goofy thing with Chevy, the Jamitol commercial, and the first line, and just sort of thinking of what he most likely had his hand in writing. But Aykroyd sort of blew him out of the water with that last skit and his contributions throughout the show.
Overall, what do I think about the very first episode of Saturday Night Live? I do think it shows a lot of promise. I love the aesthetic. I do think, and I think it's going to become obvious, no spoilers obviously, but I think it's going to become obvious that they're going to try a lot of things to see if they work. And a lot of it's not going to, but I do think you see a broad palette of that in the first episode, certainly more than you're going to see in the second episode. Like, if I rate this as if we look at Saturday Night Live all time, what would you rate this episode? If I went at a 5, I'd be like, 2.5 stars out of 5 for me on the all-time Saturday Night Live list. Just because it's first doesn't mean it's any good. Does show a lot of promise. A lot of people don't know what they're doing. 2.5 out of 5 for me on the first episode. No, I went 2.5 out of 5.
I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5.
2, okay.
And a D. If I had put this episode on today, not knowing that it was Saturday Night Live, this is just my first introduction to it, I don't think I would have put the show on again. I would have appreciated the music, but I really don't see that I would have put that show back on again. I like the aesthetic a lot, but if I was trying to watch it for comedy, I don't think I would have turned it back on.
Do you think you would have felt the same if you watched it when it aired originally?
That's what I'm thinking about. If it aired originally,
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think I would have watched it again.
Really? Even if it aired originally?
Especially if it ended on that musical note. I might have turned it back on to give it like another chance, but right off the bat, no, not my kind of show.
It's an impossible question to answer. I understand that too, of course.
Yeah, for me, I'm going 3.5 out of 5. Little bit generous. But the skeleton's there. You have that iconic Andy Kaufman moment. It's easy to forgive sins in a pilot. I mean, I don't know what I would have thought the night of, but all these years later, looking back and seeing that what's there is kind of there. Big bonuses for, Billy Preston. I think I enjoyed Carlin more than you guys, which helps. And would you like to know what the IMDb users have given this episode?
Yes, please.
Yep.
A 7.5.
They're really generous.
Too generous. Much too generous. This is not a 7.5. If this is a 7.5, then my gosh, they must think what comes later is some sort of mind-shattering comedy brilliance. Like, there is no perspective here for that rating whatsoever.
Is it extra points for being the pilot?
Yeah, maybe. And you know what? You know how I feel about George Carlin, but I think a lot of people are like, it's George Carlin, so it's just good because it's George Carlin. And I think there's a lot of that nonsense, too.
Yeah, and I like this episode more than you guys did, and I only gave it a 7. That means somebody out there is giving this 9s and 10s. But things are going to change. We've got 40-some years to go.
I can't wait. I'm ready.
So just a sort of...
SNHell.
SNHell. Just sort of an epilogue what happened to these guys. George Carlin does come back later in the show. Billy Preston does not come back, but his song You Are So Beautiful does come back in both straight and parody forms. Okay. We don't get to see Janis Ian again. And Valri Bromfield does come back for a...
Valri better bring it on her next on her next appearance, because no Valri.
So for the featured performers, we lose Janis Ian and Billy Preston, and we keep George Carlin and Valri, which probably sounds like SNHell to you guys.
It does.
So yeah, that's thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for episode 1 of SNHell, which naturally covered episode 1 of Saturday Night Live, or NBC's Saturday Night. Our next episode, we'll look at episode 2, where Paul Simon is both the host and the musical guest, and he's joined by a few friends and collaborators. We had a great time putting this together, and I hope you enjoyed hearing it as well. And hopefully we'll see you next time in SNHell.